Hi everybody, I'm Beebs Kelley. Welcome back to another video. So, not surprisingly at all for Meghan Markle, she has made almost every possible error with her As Ever brand, which on the other hand is kind of surprising because Netflix is involved. Netflix launched a product arm to their company for lots of reasons. I mean, in large part, because of merch, but they launched a product arm and that is kind of a partner or involved to some extent with As Ever. And like I've said, we probably will never know how involved they are because Meghan is keeping it really vague, and I think Netflix is keeping it vague on purpose so that if Meghan's stuff fails and falls off the edge of a cliff, then Netflix doesn't feel too embarrassed about it. So I think they're kind of keeping it hush-hush just how much involvement they have on purpose. But regardless, it's kind of weird that Meghan's brand has gone through so many mistakes. Given that Netflix is involved to some extent, that's kind of strange. But there's been lots of news and lots of buzz and some updates from this As Ever endeavor. So we need to talk about it, and we need to take a look at this from a PR and branding perspective. The marketing of all of this is just undermining. It's almost like sabotage happening here. It's pretty wild. So this past week or so, we saw Ted Sarandos, the Netflix CEO, who seems to only have found his way into that position of power on sheer dumb luck because this guy rarely makes any sort of comments that don't make him look like an idiot. Case in point, him calling Meghan Markle a rock star. He revealed that he is a fan of her, like personally. He personally likes her, which... let's be honest here. There is a total difference between liking someone in person and somebody being able to do a given job. I might like this person, but know that they would not be a good fit for this position. Therefore, they can't have this position because no matter how much I like them, what I really need out of a business is for them to do this job properly, you know? And so, that's kind of boss mistake number one. To pour money into, hire, or work with somebody just because you personally like them, not because they're going to do well or perform well or do the job right or what have you. And so because her show hasn't done particularly well, everybody is surprised that Ted is interested in keeping Meghan on. And he's like, well, I just like her, okay? It's personal. And this has only left the public with the impression that Meghan Markle has successfully love-bombed Ted Sarandos, since she doesn't even have the stats on her show to back him up in wanting to keep her on. And like I said, on one hand, I do kind of get it. A lot of people sometimes just click with somebody, and for someone like old Ted, maybe he thinks, well, although her show's not turning profit right now, maybe someday it will. Maybe Netflix is kind of breaking even, so it's kind of a no harm, no foul type situation. But on the other hand, there are ethical questions raised by keeping someone like this on for more seasons or continuing a contract when business relationship with somebody like this. It is kind of bad business. It's bad PR for sure to associate with somebody who's not only controversial, but whose projects are failing. It kind of drags the whole Netflix brand down to continue to do business with somebody who's not bringing good PR, but also not drawing the numbers and the viewership that will really make them a profitable asset to Netflix. But like I said, maybe for Ted, it's a combination of just liking her and also well, we're breaking even, and maybe eventually this will turn into a good asset down the road. And I think for a lot of people, they assume if Meghan and Harry do get divorced and Ted keeps this door open and keeps Meghan as a Netflix, talent, loosely used in this situation, then maybe he could get something that turns a huge profit if there was some sort of, divorce interview or something like that, or something else big happens, maybe not even a divorce interview, just anything big happens with them, then it would be more profitable. Anything else sensational going on will draw the eyeballs and will turn profit for Netflix. So I can understand thinking in more of a long-term investment perspective for Ted, maybe. Most importantly, though, we must remember what we're dealing with exactly here. Netflix is notoriously riddled with crappy content, quite frankly. The percentage of actually good Netflix originals is incredibly low because they put out so much content and most of it is awful. Furthermore, Ted has demonstrated incredibly poor judgment on many occasions. This guy, I have no idea how he made his way into a CEO position of Netflix, of all things, but he does not have the best of judgment, okay? Here's just a couple examples of the stupid stuff he said. One time he said that Netflix single-handedly saved Hollywood. No. Hollywood is the A-team. They are varsity. They are the best of the best in film making. And Netflix is like C-team at best and does not operate the same way at all. They stream and rely on subscribers almost exclusively, whereas Hollywood almost exclusively releases to theaters and relies on ticket sales and purchases of the content. Very different business structures. You can't really compare. Two totally different things. He also came out and defended a super controversial show called Cuties, which many viewed as having inappropriate portrayals of children. I never looked into it, obviously. But Ted came out and defended it, and it was a huge scandal at the time. So basically what we can gather here is that Ted's an idiot, and Netflix is 99% trash, so it's not really that much of a credit to Meghan for Ted to say that he's a fan and thinks she's a talent. It's not a credit to her at all. Additionally, from a PR perspective, much like Meghan and Harry's stubborn commitment to crash and burn together, just to avoid being proved wrong about their relationship and the toxic dynamics at play, Ted and Meghan are also both interested in saving face at the end of the day. They're probably taking on a lot of compromises in contract negotiations should the rumors be true that they are working to renew the contract with the Sussexes, because the deal with Harry and Meghan was one of Ted's most controversial and most criticized. Apart from their fictitious 6-episode wine fest, nothing else has drawn the numbers and profits that Netflix expected. Harry's polo, Live to Lead, no one cared and no one watched. With Love, Meghan drew some eyes initially, largely for morbid curiosity and journalists reviewing the content, which did give it a small initial spike, but that quickly plummeted, likely not quite breaking even with the cost to make the show. So clearly Ted is hoping he can sort of force a profit through longevity somehow. But also it would be admitting defeat. It would be saying, yeah, it was a mistake to give Meghan and Harry this big of a deal, and it would look like a failure for Ted and for Meghan. If he were to abandon the Sussexes now, Ted would look like he had made a mistake, he's admitting a mistake, and he's trying to move away from that mistake. So for Ted, trying to make this contract work with Meghan in a way that's going to actually keep Meghan on for the longer term and not get Netflix super angry being like, what are you doing? Stop throwing money at these people, is going to involve some sort of a balance for Ted of like betting on Meghan and Harry having some degree of longevity of, in the long run, they'll eventually turn profits, that they'll eventually make content that's sensational. Something will happen that this will give us a return in the long run, like an investment perspective, along with at least it's delivering some degree of value. Even if it's not turning profit, it's breaking even, and someday, and that way they kind of have Meghan and Harry locked in so that if anything big does happen in their future, then Netflix is the go-to, or Netflix is already there waiting in the wings. Equally as important for the Meg, if she loses Netflix, that's it. Like, there's nothing else for her out there. So she really kind of needs this to work. She needs Netflix to work out, and she needs that as her go-to because nothing else has worked, and her and Harry's popularity is at an all-time low, and there's really nothing else for them. You know what I mean? They've burned a lot of bridges, and have proven themselves to not be able to do things like podcasting or writing. So this is it. This is really it. Even Archewell and stuff doesn't look like it's going to have a very long shelf life. So Netflix is kind of the only hope. So I would imagine both parties here, the Sussexes and Netflix, are willing to just make it work somehow. Rumors on the contract offer as of filming today are that there will be little to no advance, meaning no upfront money for Meghan and Harry this time, and that the pay to the Meg or whomever, the pay for the shows will be based on performance of the show, on viewership of the show. So a lot more like a commission-based structure or royalties-based structure, similar to what a lot of people get when they work with Netflix. But that Netflix will renew with Love Meghan and continue to partner on as ever, which means that Meghan won't necessarily be making big bucks unless these things start performing well. And Ted won't get himself into even more trouble at Netflix by making more bad investments while saving face. So this really feels like a reputation salvaging type of deal. Along with this, we have news that Meghan's brand, as ever, has made an announcement that she is going to restock the items that were part of the initial launch sometime this year, but they aren't going to expand the range to include new products until next year. She said she's going to step back and assess the data to see what the customer's needs are seasonally before launching new products. That's what she said. Well, there's several issues with this. First, you won't know what the customer's needs are seasonally if you're only launching one group of products 2 times in a year. Like the stuff that she launched in like March or April or whatever, if she's only restocking that over the course of an entire year, that's only the same sets of products, so there's no way to tell whether there is a change in needs seasonally. You know what I mean? Like, what is she talking about? And for such a small micro launch, such as the one that she did, there's not that much data to analyze. There really isn't, because it was rumored to be a very small launch, a micro launch, which is common. The first time you're going to launch a product line or something of any kind, you do want to do the smallest possible amount because you don't want to have it not sell and be in the hole. If it sells out, then great. Just get onto a restock quickly. So the fact that she did a micro launch isn't a problem at all. That makes sense. That's one of the few things she did that made sense. But saying that she needs to step back and assess the data is not only sending the message that she's kind of putting the whole thing on pause, which is bad PR, but also like there's not much data. How would you be overwhelmed over like maybe a few hundred units? Like, what's happening? So it's more logical to infer that this is kind of putting a spin on something else happening entirely. That behind the scenes, there's an entire different situation going on that caused her to need to put things on hold for a little while. And she's spinning it by saying that she's wanting to assess data and she's going to stay super duper busy sorting things out and making plans rather than divulging what's actually happening behind the scenes. So although her products did sell out, like I said, it was a micro launch, it was a small amount, but it also doesn't necessarily mean that it sold out for the right reasons. This was, once again, a spike of morbid curiosity and a lot of journalists and reporters and people on social media who just wanted to review it because that's their job or that's the type of thing that they do on their channels or that they got that assignment from their newspapers, you know, and their websites. Like, there were so many reviews of the products and people who ordered it for the purpose of reviews, and a lot of people who were just morbidly curious, that left very little room for genuine public customers. So there was very few actual just randos, people of the public, who bought these products. The majority of sales were people reviewing it and people who were just morbidly curious about it. And out of all of the people who did make purchases from the first As Ever launch, whether it was because they drew the short stick and had to review it, or were general public and regular customers, across all these people, very few people reviewed it positively. Most reviews had problems with the taste of the items, the presentation of the items, found them just to not be extraordinary, meaning it wasn't really worth the hassle and the upcharge and the shipping and all of that to order from her versus just getting it from the grocer. Which means the reception of the products and the reviews of the products was poor, despite them selling quickly. So what she's actually trying to say is that for now, probably at Netflix's consumer goods arm behest, they are going to reassess the product range. Things like quality and the labels being crooked, they're probably trying to take a look at those types of things and the actual products themselves, things like taste, and try to solve the problems that were in the overwhelmingly negative feedback. And because the reviews were not great, it means that as ever risks not selling out in the future. They risk consumers never being return buyers and avoiding the brand due to the bad reviews and reputation for it not being great. And since the next time that products are going to come available, it's going to be a restock of the same products, perhaps there will be less people who are reviewing it because they're like, well, I've already bought it and reviewed it and written the article, so there's nothing new here. So the journalists and the people who were just morbidly curious, or the people who got stuff, didn't like it, didn't like the taste, which is the majority of people fall into that category. The majority of sales are either people who reviewed it poorly, didn't like it, didn't like the taste, or were journalists or morbidly curious or were reviewing it. They're not going to be ordering it again when she restocks these items. So the sales might be profoundly smaller the next time she has products available if there's no new products available. You know what I'm saying? And there is something to be said for reassessing after your first launch and your first group of sales, of course. Like, for example, with the jam that's spread, the raspberry spread, the goop. It's so liquidy. Meghan tried something new and different. It was a bad idea. People don't want incredibly runny fruit sauce marketed and packaged as jam. Because I know the label says spread, but she's been saying jam for over a year, and it's packaged the way jam is packaged. Sauce is what it really is. Sauce tends to come in different types of packaging that looks less like a jam jar. Or it just says sauce. Her saying spread is usually a consistency more like butter, peanut butter, cream cheese, things that you can spread on something and it stays there. You know what I'm saying? Like, spread, you think of something that will stay on the bread. She should have marketed it as sauce because that's what it is, and it's the consistency of a sauce, and the only way she seems to be telling people to use it is to put it on top of ice cream, which would be a sauce. So looking at that problem, just for example, and seeing that there really isn't a demand for this consistency of a fruit spread, okay? There's not a market. There's no consumers really wanting and desiring this consistency of fruit spread that's like a sauce. Then maybe they will decide to repackage it as sauce instead of spread. Or maybe they'll decide to change the consistency. Either way, it's smart to take a beat and be like, okay, how can we fix this and solve this problem? Because this didn't quite land, right? So that part of it's fine. Because at the end of the day, it's incredibly important for businesses to get customers to return. And based on the reviews, the data that Meghan thinks she has the capacity to analyze will show her that the probability of long-term success is minimal and that they are at risk for failing big time. And that's not even the only problems that they're dealing with here. Because of Meghan's out-of-touch ideas and lack of creativity, the woman is not clever. The trademark hasn't even been approved for as ever and these products, this brand, at this point in time, which may also be contributing to everything needing to stall for a while and not being able to restock very quickly and not being able to work towards new products beyond the quality and reviews problem because they still don't have the trademark. So they can't really invest in bigger quantities and a more, long-term vision if they still don't even have a trademark? We also have the fact that when the Meg filmed the episodes, she was trying to use the products in the show, but nothing was ready yet. The trademark, the label, she hadn't even decided on As Ever as the name yet. So there were no labels, there was no packaging, there was no brand names solidified, there was nothing like that in the series. And so her slapdash chaotic approach also diminished the very purpose of the partnership and the concept of the show in general, because it was meant to be like basically in a large part an advertisement for her products that she was going to be selling, because she was using them in almost every episode and very heavily in the last episode, but they had no branding, no name. She wasn't able to market it. And that was probably a big part of Netflix's strategy. So they're probably pretty pissed at the way that worked out. And because she wasn't able to properly showcase and essentially advertise the brand in the first set of episodes, then that would make sense that they want to stall. They want to wait a little while because they want to be able to maximize the advertising, the product placement throughout With Love, Meghan. Because from Netflix's view, it is more like a big, huge advertisement. All of this looks and feels very, very amateur, even immature, which is never going to instill confidence in a consumer. It's no surprise. She's not an entrepreneur or a businesswoman. She's just winging it. So she's got no concept of marketing or delivering value or creating a need and solution for consumers, which are all really important parts to a business. So to now have this long list of problems. Show ratings are low, viewership is underwhelming, bad reviews all around. Bad reviews of the products, diminished reputation of As Ever as a brand, low probability of return buyers, lack of information about the restock and future launches, indicating a gross lack of organization behind the scenes, stifling the excitement and awareness for the consumers, but also just making it look like you don't have a good long-term vision, you don't have your shit together. There's still no trademark, meaning the branding might have to change once again if they can't secure the trademark. They might have to go to an entirely different name. They might not be able to use As Ever, or they might decide that the lowercase e and the way that she did it and stuff like that, it just isn't sticking. It's not working because it's a bad name for this type of brand. As I said, it would make sense for like stationery. It would. It doesn't make sense for this though. And the fact that they don't have the trademark means they can't really dive in on this full force and really put all their eggs in this basket until they get that trademark. Fifth problem, With Love, Meghan was meant to be one big advertisement and marketing campaign for the products, which ended up failing because of her inability to accomplish the business goals on time. The announcement revealing that they're back to analyzing doesn't bode well. It indicates that there are problems behind the scenes. And her talk about the brand and CEOing is completely out of alignment with reality. She acts like she knows everything about business all of a sudden. She's throwing out things like the SKUs and the tranche of products, this vocabulary that she clearly doesn't understand, and saying that she's going to analyze all this data. It's just see-through. It's obvious that she doesn't know what she's doing. So all of this has really muted anticipation and buzz about As Ever as a brand and any future product launches, but it also is making everything feel super stale. It feels like she threw this at us prematurely when it was half done, and it leaves a bad impression on the public. Not just people who have been watching, who have paid attention, who are royal watchers and therefore are subject to Meghan Markle news all the time unwillingly, against their will and wishes. All of these people who are paying attention are already tired of it. But the rest of the public who haven't paid a close attention, just randomly hear little headlines here and there, it's going to leave a really bad impression to them because they're just hearing kind of bad reviews and then what sounds like a lot of problems behind the scenes and disorganization. So they're really setting themselves up for failure, but I think that there are bigger problems behind the scenes brewing on this As Ever brand, and I think that Meghan is trying to cover it up. But leave your thoughts in the comments of all this recent news. I cannot wait to hear what you think. Thank you for joining me for today's video. I hope you have a happy day ahead, and I'll see you next time. Bye!